Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian Rosenkrantz, Chief Revenue Officer here at Webflow. And today, I'm joined by Ethan Smith, CEO of Graphite. Ethan has been at the forefront of how AI is transforming search and has spoken extensively about answer engine optimization and the future of discovery online. Ethan, thank you so much for joining.
Excited to be here.
Let's kick it off with breaking down the history of search and how people find information online. Can you tell us a little bit about what the last 20 years have been like?
Sure. So Google launched in the early 2000s, and there were a bunch of search engines that launched before them, but right around the late 90s and the early 2000s. And so Google, one of their key innovations was PageRank, where depending on how many people link to you, you're more important, because relevance was solved, but the authority problem was not solved. And so Google invented PageRank, and then they built their authority signal around that. And that's how they won, is having a better sorting of the URL or the domains and the URLs that show up. So it's not just about the relevance problem, which is actually easier. It's about the authority problem. And you actually see that now with some of the LLMs where they have good relevance, but they're struggling to figure out which sites should be the most authoritative. And so Google's been able to build that up over the last 25 years. And so a lot of the parallels for what we have seen work in search also apply to LMs.
Amazing. What is AEO actually?
Yeah, so how I define AEO is I want my brand or my website to be recommended in an answer. So if I ask what's the best website builder, what's the best payroll management software, I want my product to show up, just like I want my product to show up when someone's searching for that in Google. So AEO is optimizing for your brand or your product to appear in an LLM answer.
And what are some common misconceptions about answer engine optimization?
I think the number one misconception is that it's completely different from SEO. And there's a lot of similarities because the underlying technologies, search is a key part of LMs. When you ask a question, frequently search is a part of that. And so the same strategies that apply for SEO apply for answer engine optimization. So I think the number one misconception is that they're totally different. There are some differences, which is the head and the tail. The head is optimizing for the head is optimizing for offsite. And for the tail, a lot of questions have never been answered before, and a lot of questions have never been searched for before. So the tail is larger and longer, but the core principles of SEO all apply for AEO.
Amazing. So let's break down some of these acronyms because we're hearing so many of them. So we have SEO, we have AEO, we have GEO, we have AIO. Can you just choose and break down the most important ones you think everyone should better understand, so if they're trying to build a strategy today on how they are discoverable online?
Sure. So we can first describe what exactly are we doing, and then we can describe the acronym that represents that. So search engine optimization is optimizing for search engines. That could be Google, that could be Bing, that could be Yahoo, that could be YouTube. These are all different kinds of search engines. And so the field of SEO is optimizing for showing up in search engines. Now there are LMs like ChatGPT, like Perplexity. And so we want to help promote our brand and our product in those products. So then what is the name for helping promote your product in these new services, large language models? And so, ultimately the name, the best name is what everyone agrees the name should be. So there's not an objectively true name for this, but we're figuring out what that name could be. They all sort of are trying to represent the same thing. So there's answer engine optimization, there's generative engine optimization, there's AI search engine optimization, and then there's AIO, AI optimization. We will see ultimately what the best name is, but back to the actual question is we're optimizing for LLMs, and so how different is that from optimizing for search engines? And I think that there's actually a lot of similarities in search engine optimization and optimizing for LLMs, because LLMs are frequently doing searches. So a lot of the core principles for SEO apply to marketing for LMs.
Very interesting. I think one thing you mentioned that is so important is that agents or large language models are actually using search to get answers to questions. And so I think this gets us to this big debate that exists today, which is SEO, is it dead? And I'm curious to get your take on it, given actually LLMs do actually search. So how would you explain whether you think SEO is dead or is it just evolving?
Yeah, so I've been researching the history of the death of SEO. And you can look back for quite a while about claims that SEO is dead. And so the first claim by major media that SEO is dead was in 2013, I believe, where it was social media is going to kill SEO. And then it was Penguin and Panda, and then it was mobile apps are going to kill not only SEO but the internet. And then it was YouTube, and then it was TikTok and Instagram. So there's all these, every few years there's a brand new claim that SEO will be dead. And so what we're seeing, and the premise is that a new channel growing means an existing channel must go down because it's zero sum. The pie is fixed. But actually what we're seeing is the slice of the pie is the same size, but the pie is getting bigger. So Google's slice of the pie, organic search, has been flat, and it's been flat for multiple years. But these new channels are incremental and add on top of it. And so same with ChatGPT, Perplexity, the LLMs. This is a new incremental channel. So we're not seeing any drop at all in search. What we're seeing is new channels and new opportunities to drive impact. And so that's all additive and all incremental. So premise one is that search is going down, which we're not seeing. Premise two is that the strategies are entirely different. So the strategies for LLMs and the strategies for search are completely different. And they do have some differences, but they're, the core fundamentals are largely the same, which is that frequently there's a search happening and the LLM is summarizing the search results. So the core principles still apply, but there's a few key differences with optimizing for LLMs that are different from search.
I'm curious, how do you see expectations changing for a user in SEO and AEO compared to what they might have been a couple years ago, as we've seen more effective predictive engines of what a user wants?
I think people's expectations are higher for chat than they are for search. Because in search, Google's saying, here are some places where you can get an answer. Whereas in chat is saying, I have the answer, and this is the answer, and I'm certain of it. And so I think that the expectations of the answer in chat are much higher. Also, I'm asking more specific questions, and so my expectations for the quality of the answer are much higher.
What are the key things that you see in SEO and AEO that you believe are true today for both?
So basically, everything in SEO is true for AEO. AEO is essentially a superset of SEO. So if you just do SEO well, that'll work for free in AEO. And most companies that are doing well in answer engines, the majority of the reason why is because they did their SEO well. So basically, everything in SEO works for AEO. Then AEO is a superset of SEO. So that, again, the two things that are different are the head and the tail. So for the head, you need to, for the most competitive questions, you need to not only have your URL show up, but have other people mention you. And then the tail, which is there are questions that have never been searched for before or even asked before, but they're being asked now. So having the answers to these extremely specific questions in the tail, these are the two differences, but everything else in SEO still works for answer engines. Finding the right topics that you want to target, having proper technical setup, proper internal link architecture, schema, being authoritative, getting backlinks, getting shares, and then having content that answers all the questions. All of those work for SEO, all of those work for AEO.
So let's get tactical. What are the levers that influence both search engine optimization and answer engine optimization?
Yes, so concept one is topics. And topics I mentioned before, where early in Google search, you targeted one keyword and you had millions of pages that targeted millions of keywords. And now you have hundreds or thousands of pages that target tens of millions of keywords. And so groups of keywords are a topic. One page for best website builder can target 1,000 or 5,000 different keywords. And so in search, that's a search topic. In answer engine optimization, there's maybe 5,000 different ways to ask the same question of, I want you to help me find a website builder. And so we call those topics. And topics are clusters of questions where the intent is generally similar, but there are these sub-themes and subtopics. And so your page can target thousands of questions. And you want to make sure that the page fulfills the intent of those thousands of questions. And then going from topics to what should be on the page, what is good content? And the way that I think about good content is good content answers all the questions that the user has. And then the same thing is true for answer engine optimization. If you haven't answered a follow-up question, then you're not going to show up. And if you do, then you will show up. So topics is the first thing, and then comprehensive content is the second thing. Next thing is authority. And so I mentioned that Google's key innovation was their authority algorithm PageRank and helping not only figure out what's relevant, but sorting the domain and the URL that's the best quality among the pack. And so the same thing is true for LLMs, where LLMs need to have the exact same problem, which is which domain, like I've found 1,000 pages that are relevant, which of the 1,000 should I show in what order?
So how you think about your content, how you think about the authority. What about the technical setup? Is that similar or different between SEO and AEO?
It's very similar, is the short answer. The longer answer is that I mentioned when Google started, its algorithm was not mature and it had all of these holes. And so technical SEO was born out of, number one, Google couldn't understand the page. And so you needed to help their algorithm and their crawler crawl your site and understand the page. You had to go, above and beyond to do that. The second thing is exploiting all the holes, spamming Google by, using technical games to exploit their algorithm. And so you don't need to help Google read your page. Generally speaking, there's not a lot you need to do to help Google index your page. And there's also not really dramatic holes in their algorithm. So technical SEO still matters, but it doesn't matter as much. The stuff that matters in technical SEO, the same stuff that matters in answer engines, is making sure that Google can crawl your site, traverse your site with good internal link architecture. Same thing with LLMs. You want to make sure that you link to all the content on your site so that the LLM can find all the content on your site. Same with Google. So that's the first thing. The second thing is make sure your page isn't broken. And sometimes people will implement JavaScript in a way that just makes it hard for bots to crawl it. Usually not. LLMs and Google can both read JavaScript, but don't use weird, page rendering there. And then the third thing is schema. And so schema matters a lot. Schema matters in Google. And
What is schema?
Sure. So schema is a way to take, let's say I have a restaurant or I have a hotel, and I'm giving Google and I'm giving the LLM the name of my hotel, the reviews, pictures of my hotel, maybe when you can book my hotel. And so you're basically creating structured data out of your item, and then you're feeding into the LLM or to Google. And that's all structured, and that's all fed into the LLM via schema. And so schema is probably the most important thing, along with internal links and making sure your page can be read. Those are the three most important things.
So is it fair to say that when you use schema properly, you are taking your website and your page and you're labeling it in very clear ways so that it gets better understood by either an LLM or an SEO algorithm?
Yes, and we've also tested adding schema when you didn't have schema before. So we did a test with Medium where their Medium posts with recipes did not have schema. And so then we created something that would automatically create structure out of the recipes. And then we added schema to the recipe pages, and traffic went up roughly by 20%. So it was pretty dramatic. So the content was exactly the same thing. We just automatically added schema, and then traffic went up. And traffic went up because Google could see that there was a recipe. And the same is true for LLMs. If you go from not having schema to having schema, it makes a big difference.
Amazing. All right. Then there's the measurement of everything. I think that is really an interesting topic. And how do you measure SEO and AEO? How different is it? How similar is it? And has it been evolving?
So this is one of the things that's dissimilar, and it's getting harder and harder to measure. So early in Google SEO, you could measure everything by just getting referral clicks, and you could see how many clicks you got from Google, and then you could see how many conversions you got, all with last touch, referring domain equals Google. So that was easy. And then it's gotten harder and harder. And part of why it's gotten harder is because if I'm deciding whether or not to use, whether or not to buy a car, whether or not to sign up for a payroll management software company, I'm not just typing in payroll management software company and clicking and buying, spending $50,000. I'm building intent over many, many touch points. But you could still see how many clicks did I get from Google. Now with answers, more and more answers are zero click. In fact, most answers are zero click. And so it's getting much harder to actually measure the impact of LLMs. And so for that reason, the way that I think about it is you measure the beginning and the end, but not the middle. And so by that I mean you can measure when someone converts by asking, how did you hear about us? And it's self-reporting, so it's not perfect. But you can just ask someone, how did you get here? What drove you here? That you can measure. The second thing you can measure is, am I appearing in answers? So you can take the set of questions that you want to perform in, and you can see, am I appearing? And you can use there's a whole suite of different answer tracking tools, but take the questions that you want to win and see, am I appearing? So that's the beginning, and then how did you hear about us is the end.
If I'm starting an answer engine optimization strategy, where do I start?
So you start with which questions do you want to win? And you select the questions that you want to win by figuring out what your paid search keywords are, what you're ranking for in Google search. Like pick those first keywords and then turn them into questions. And so then you start with your topics. Second is you measure them. So you put them in a tracking tool and you see how you're performing. What are the patterns for the page types that are ranking? What are the citations that are ranking? The third is technical. So given the citations that are ranking, how do you structure your page? Is it a listicle? Is it a template? Is it a calculator? Is it an article? So then you set up your page. Then when you're setting up your page and your website, you need to make sure that your technical infrastructure is set up properly. And the most important things there are your internal link architecture, making sure that the LMs can crawl your site. And then the second is schema. So if you have a product or a restaurant or a recipe, showing schema markup for that particular page type. The fourth is content. And content is answering all the questions that a user has about your product. And then last is authority. And so authority, you can break that up into two kinds of authority. It's your authority on-site and it's your authority off-site. So on-site authority is similar to PageRank. Backlinks, shares, branded search, just doing good brand marketing. So that's your on-site authority, and that helps your URL show up in citations. Then there's off-site authority, and off-site authority is one of the biggest differences with LLMs with search is off-site. So off-site is who else are in the citation set for the questions that you want to win, which can be the patterns that I'm seeing the most are UGC, so Reddit, Quora, Stack Overflow, video, YouTube, Vimeo, Instagram, TikTok, affiliates, other blogs, but authority, the authority now expands into LLMs where it's this off-site authority that I need to build.
I think we're all very curious to understand, how do we optimize our site to show up more in answers? And can you give me an example?
Sure. So we actually worked with the Webflow team on the feature landing pages, worked with Vivian, and we wanted to win in our money pages, which is design and SEO and the core features and use cases for Webflow. And so what we did was we looked at what questions do people have about the features that Webflow has. So we looked at forums, we looked at Reddit, what follow-up questions. So not just what is it and how do I do it, but more detailed specific questions. And so back to good content answers all of the questions that people have. And so we mined those UGC forums and Reddit to figure out what the questions were. And so then we reworked the page to make sure that we answered those questions, number one. So the content was there, the answers were there. And then the second thing is creating structure around that so it's even easier for LLMs to see it. And so we created a schema on those feature landing pages. And so then that created structured data that can be fed into the LLMs. And then the LLMs can more easily find the answer. And so all these changes, better answering the questions, restructuring the content, and then adding schema resulted in a 24% lift in visibility. So that's an example of us optimizing on-site.
What are things that are really hard because they take a lot of time, but are actually also really impactful to drive SEO and AEO?
Yeah, so I think content freshness is probably one of those. And as the bigger a website is, the more you've already answered a lot of questions. And so there's only so many new pages you can create as you mature as a website. And so then you want to focus on content freshness. So going back to your top pages, it's common for a page to do really well, and then you start trailing off. You start trailing off because the algorithms want fresh content, recent content. And so a really good strategy as you become a more established site is to go back to the content that you already have and refresh it. And then the other is, technology is changing so quickly. A lot of things are changing quickly. Going back and adding new information that maybe, there's new technology and new innovations that are happening, adding stuff around that.
What are the common things that are low-hanging fruit that people just miss when we're talking about how to be discoverable, whether it's SEO or AEO?
The two things that stand out the most, that are the quickest wins, are your title tags and internal links. And I say that because these are things that can have a very quick effect, and they're easy to do. And so title tags are the single most important relevance factor for any of these algorithms. And what I see the most is that you have a title tag that is missing keywords. So if I had a page saying 5-year plan, and then I don't have examples, adding examples in the title, adding examples in the body will very quickly get you to rank. We did an experiment with Notion where we added, I believe we didn't have examples in the templates page, and we added a keyword, and we saw traffic go up by, I think it was 15 to 20% by just adding stuff to the title tag. So when I mentioned answering questions that you haven't answered yet, it's not just answering it in the body, it's also telling the bot in the title, which is the most important thing, that you have examples. And so title tags is the number one quickest win. And then the second is internal links. It's common to not have good cross-linking within a site. And a lot of times you have important pages that just aren't linked to enough. So just adding better cross-linking can also have a very quick impact. We've run several tests where we see 10 to 20% impact within days by optimizing internal links.
Let's break down what cross-linking versus backlinking is.
Yeah, so backlinking is helping authority. So backlinking is another website's linking to me. And I mentioned PageRank, and that was the key innovation with PageRank, which is how do you know which site is legitimate? It's how many other sites are linking to you. So that's what backlinking is, and that helps me with my authority. That means that my site's going to show up, my URLs are going to show up higher in Google, higher in LLMs, because I'm a more authoritative site. So that's backlinking. Then there's internal links. So internal links is me linking within my own website. And this is an interesting example because in 2008, when I was getting started in SEO, we had a site with millions of pages, and I saw a very clear correlation with the more you link to a page, the more likely you are to get traffic. And so the exact same thing is still true today, which is better linking within your site means your page will get crawled better, which means you'll get more traffic.
There's a lot of discussion around how you need to have very clean code on your website so you can be found. Can you explain that?
Sure. So, when we talk about technical SEO, it's important that the bot can understand what's on the page. A misunderstanding is that basic HTML and CSS and JavaScript, that LLMs can't parse that properly, and you need to specially reformat the content in Markdown or these other formats, and that's not actually true. All you need to do is just have to not have the page be broken, have it be clean. And so that just means very basic headers, bullet points, images, schema. It's just don't break the page. Do things in a basic, proper, best practice way. All of this stuff matters.
As I talk to business leaders, one of the big questions is how do they need to think about how the funnel is changing today with these changes going from SEO and now adding AEO?
And so it's not a question of doing this versus that. It's invest in all of them. Next thing is, how do I build a team? Like, how do I actually win in LLMs? Is that a different team? And my suggestion is it's the same team, but the skills are expanding. And so I would hire people to do search engine optimization and then ask them to expand into these other channels. So I mentioned that optimizing for LLMs has the same underlying strategies for answer engines. To fill the long tail, it's the same principles. It's finding out what questions people are asking and then having content that fulfills that. Building the landing pages, very similar. Your technical infrastructure, all of that remains the same. And so when I think about building a team to actually execute on that, it's take your SEO team and expand them. And the main thing to expand with your SEO team is keep doing SEO, but optimize for the head and the tail. So the tail is finding those questions that haven't been answered yet, building content around that, and then the head, which is citation optimization, getting mentioned in Reddit, building YouTube videos, affiliates, outreach. And so I would basically take your SEO team and expand it, but it's not either or. You can do both at the same time with the same team.
One of the questions that is often asked is, do I focus on showing up in more AEO or SEO results, or is that just going to be too hard and I should actually focus just on conversion? What would be the way you would approach that?
I would do both. You can optimize for conversion. And I think that conversion optimization is a largely misunderstood category because people think it's just split testing. Like, we're just going to come up with some ideas semi-randomly and like do some split tests, and we're going to move the button around and change the color. But there's a science to how to do split testing. So there's a science for how to to do the test, and there's a science for how to come up with the ideas to test. A lot of people are familiar with how to test, which is you set up a split test and you look for statistical significance. Like, that's well understood. The science of what to test is very little understood. And the way to think about a conversion flow is it's essentially a decision-making flow. And when a user comes, they have a series of decisions that they need to make. Like, if I'm looking for the best payroll management software, I need to know whether or not I trust you, whether or not you fulfill my use case, whether or not you're better than another option. Like, there's all these different decisions that are made. And there's science around each of those decisions in decision sciences and psychology. And so I think that if you can break down your conversion funnel into these series of decisions and how those decisions are made, then you can generate the best ideas. Then you can test things that are the most likely to test. Most split tests fail because the idea was the wrong idea. And I'll give a specific example. So I was working with Honey, the coupon app, and they have all these coupons, Kohl's coupons. And Retail Me Not has Kohl's coupons. And so the obvious goal of a user on Honey is to get a coupon. And we played around with button color and button text and moving that around. We didn't get that many wins. But the actual deeper intent of a user for Honey is to get a coupon code that works, because most coupon codes don't work. And so you have to go through all this work of failed coupon codes. And it can take 10 minutes to find the code. Maybe you never find a code. And what's unique about Honey is that they're figuring out which codes actually work for you. So then we changed the button text to automatically apply all coupons in one click. So you don't have to do all that work, and it's the coupon code that works. That, I think it doubled or tripled the conversion rate. And it wasn't about how big the button was or what the color was. It was understanding the deep intent of the user and then feeding that into the test. And so you can think about any conversion funnel, which is breaking it down into a series of decisions, understanding the deep intent, and then generating ideas based on that.
Okay, so conversion matters. And it sounds like you don't think we should trade off on AEO and visibility there. And it doesn't have to be a one or the other.
Yeah, I think both matter, and you can do both at the same time. And we also talked about engagement. So Google wants to fulfill the intent. It wants you to eventually convert. Same with LLMs. And LLMs ultimately want to give you an answer and have you complete and fulfill your intent. And so I think it's necessary to do both of those. Also, you'll get more value out of your traffic if you improve your conversion rate. One other interesting thing about answers is that they're much more qualified because again, chat is built for conversations where you're asking all these follow-up questions. So if I'm asking what the best website builder is with this feature, with this integration that does this, that fulfills my use case, I'm very primed to convert once I've asked all these questions and I've gotten answers. So the intent of the user is significantly higher for answers. And so the value of the traffic is much, much higher, which is why you see companies with 8%, 10% of their conversions coming from LLMs is because they're so primed. And so I think you want to do both.
One other thing that we're seeing is an 125% increase in LLM AI bot crawls on Webflow hosted sites. And this is a challenge that is facing all CMOs and CEOs of marketing today. And I'm curious, like you said really critically, that the pie is getting bigger. How do you think a CEO or CMO should look at what's happening in the world today? And what would you say are the most important principles that they should operate with?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would recommend is that there are many things to work on, and there are not infinite resources. So my general suggestion is whenever there's a new trend, don't over-index on what you think it might be. Look at what the total size of the channel is today, and then look at the growth curve. So the total size of the channel today for LLMs, it's still smaller than search. So it's maybe 1/5 or 1/10 the size of search, but that's still meaningful. So a lot of companies that we work with, 8% of their signups are coming from LLMs. So that's a substantial channel. A year ago, it was maybe 1% or 0.5%. And my recommendation is it's interesting, keep an eye on it, but don't over-index on a channel that's a half a percent of your conversions when you could be working on something that's 30% of your conversions. It's now a meaningful channel. Also, the growth curve is steep, and so if you extrapolate that out a year or two, it's probably going to double or triple. I'm not sure how big it'll be, but it's a substantial channel. So my general recommendation to executives is to look at the total size of the channel today and what you think it might look like in a year, and then resource accordingly. The second thing is you don't need to pick just search or just optimizing for LMs. You can pick both, and so you can have a holistic strategy for both of these. So it's not a question of either to do SEO or to do answer engine optimization. You can do both.
Ethan, thank you for joining today and talking us through SEO, AEO, how the world is evolving in the new era of the AI web.
Thank you for having me.
If you'd like to dive deeper into everything we covered today, from strategy to implementation, check out the full AEO course on Webflow University. You'll find practical next steps to help your brand stand out in AI search.